my people vote. You know that we are the voices.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Our Voice Podcast and the Desmond Show. I am Desmond Meade, Executive Director of Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, and my partner over here is...
What's going on, y'all? This is Neil Volz, Deputy Director of Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. Fired up for everybody to be here for the Our Voice Podcast. How you doing, man?
Man, it seems like forever since I've been on the show, man. You've been sneaking around my back, bringing in some guests and everything.
Yeah,
in my absence and stuff, man. What's been happening?
You were missed, man. Is what was happening.
Man,
The conversation was good, but it ain't the same without Desmond Meade behind the microphone. You know?
Yeah, man. So listen, Our Voice Podcast, man. This is, as always, an opportunity to elevate the voices of people who are directly impacted, the people who are closest to the pain. We understand that a lot of folks got degrees and all that kind of good stuff, right? And we have allies that are stand in the paint and fight right alongside us, man. But there ain't nothing, Neil, it ain't nothing like hearing the voices of people directly impacted, and that's what this show does, man. We elevate that.
No, that's right. Think about it, right? Anywhere else that we'd see it, you know, you want to talk about agriculture in Florida? Well, why aren't you going to bring in the farmers, right? You're going to be somebody who lives it. Why wouldn't, this whole thing be the same, right?
That's right.
Got some life experiences, bring to the table, got a better understanding of how that works, man. I love what I love what we got going on here.
Yeah, man. And our team, man, our production team of Zay and Brandon, call them Zay B.
Zay B, I like that. That's their production name.
That's
all right.
Zay B Productions. I've always been just coming through time after time after time after time and making sure that we got our stuff together. So shout out to our production crew, Zay B Productions.
I love it. Right? And they just keep bringing good guests, man. Good conversation. Today is no different, man.
Yeah, well, tell us about today, man. What's happening today?
We going. I'm excited.
Man, listen, let's go.
We got a trailblazer. We got a leader in this state who's joining us today.
Really?
She happens to be a friend of both of ours, but, man, people need to know, right? Like, you know what? Let me just start the hype machine. Can I start the hype machine? Right? Because I look at this list.
I'm looking at it too,
it's like
man.
17 pages of amazing things that she's done. I'm just going to say the top 5, though, right?
Take top 5.
Right? So this unnamed person now, right, is...
Who we both know.
Okay. Right? Before graduating from the University of Virginia School of Law, she graduated from Harvard. Harvard. That's right.
Oh, okay.
Exactly, Harvard. She spent 5 years as an active duty Air Force JAG, prosecuting military in courts martial in the military. She retired from the Air Force Reserves as a major 2005. She is the past president of the League of Women Voters of Bay County.
Bay County in the house.
Exactly. Come on now, Bay County. And she currently serves as the president of the League of Women Voters of Florida, and she is the first black woman to serve in this capacity.
Whoa.
Trailblazing, man.
Yeah, I mean, matter of fact, you know what? Nah, I'm save that comment for later on in the show.
Okay, well, look. With no further ado, let me just say it. Cecile Scoon, welcome to the Our Voice Podcast. It is great to have you on the show. How you doing today?
What's up, Cecile?
Cecile, can you hear us?
I hear you well.
Yeah, there she
What's
is.
Up, Cecile?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So
it's
welcome to the show.
Wonderful to be in your presence. I'm telling you had me going back in my mind to watching you all get the crowds excited and get people signing up to vote and get involved and help other people. And I love that atmosphere.
Cecile, I remember that time too. As a matter of fact, you sometimes seem like you were more excited than everybody else. I thought, is that woman a returning citizen?
I remember you walking up the hill and being like, whoa, she's leading and got everybody all fired up.
She was fired up. I was like, man, where all this energy coming from?
Your mission is so powerful, and part of the healing that our nation and our state needs to do to bring people together. It's part of the healing process. So I was inspired when I heard you speak the first time, and I decided right then and there that I could spend the rest of my life working on this project.
Well, like I said, that you were like fired up and ready to go. And I know that, that fire didn't just, appear out of nowhere on that day that we met in Tallahassee at our advocacy day. That it had to come from something that was instilled in you sometime before that. And so, I want to really just start out, man. Where were you raised, and what was your family like growing up?
Okay. Well, that's an interesting question. My dad was from the Caribbean. He's from Grenada. And I was born in the States, but at about 11, we went back home to the islands where my dad was a Peace Corps director. So I actually grew up in the Caribbean, came back to the States. I was 15. And those years were pretty impactful. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. But I guess I got to see the lens of race and the lens of nationality from a different perspective, what it feels like when you're not in our country, what life looks like.
So what was that like then, Cecilia? How did kind of, being a person of Caribbean descent and living there for a couple of years, like how did that inform you as it relates to kind of your racial justice work, your activity within the civil rights movement? I mean, it sounds like it just was right there at the center of the whole thing.
It was profound because when you grow up in a nation where the people that run the nation look just like you, and the people that would come and visit that we were nice to, we called them visitors. They were white people. The white people were the visitors, and we liked them. They were nice, but they weren't a big part of how the community operated. So I had that different perspective, sort of the opposite perspective of, I think, what people experience in our country. So often Blacks are not part of the power structure. We don't own as much property, a lot of differences. And so I had the opposite experience of being part of the powerful community. And that definitely impacted me when I came back to the States. I thought I literally was in an Alice in Wonderland kind of environment because I saw the opposite coming back home to the States.
Let me ask you, Cecile, what outside of the differences in the race of the folks who were like in positions of power, what was the major difference between the two?
Well, in the Caribbean, I was in the island that was British, and the islands, the different colonial masters had left a different imprint. The French have a certain way of doing business, and I was in a British island, which is very proper. Everybody knows their place, and very, very friendly. It was highly literate. People read of all economic backgrounds. They read the paper, and they were very politically involved. And that is something that embedded on my mind of how important it is for people to vote, know who the politicians are, know what they're offering. And that is a little bit of a change from coming back to the States. People are not from overall as directly involved with voting.
Yeah. So, Cecile, so as Neil was reading off, the introduction and everything, right? He mentioned that you graduated from Harvard, right? And from Harvard.
Yes.
I applied to Harvard too. I didn't get accepted, man. So, that's mad kudos to anybody who get accepted, much less even graduate from Harvard. But, one of the things that our production team was able to unearth when they was doing their research was something about the Board of Overseers at Harvard University and some type of action that you had against the Board of Overseers. So can you tell us who are the Board of Overseers and what did they do? What did they do to get you riled up and into this activism world?
What? Well, that title, right? It's scary.
Board of Overseers.
So when I was in college,
scary, right? Harvard's
right?
Board
They
of
need
Overseers.
to get another phrase. I think they could use another phrase. We'll have to send them some suggestions. But when I was in school, they still were investing in South Africa, which was imposing apartheid. So here we were at Harvard, and all of your classmates were multi-hued, Asians, Native Americans. We had some African Americans, people from the Caribbean, people from Africa, Asians of all types. And we were sitting in class and learning that Harvard was receiving income from the diamond mines and so on in South Africa, which imposed Black people lived over here and white people lived over there. And it was against the law to intermarry. It was just a lot of stuff. And so the students, we would go to the meetings and we would demand that they would divest out of South Africa. And so we would have our little, we'd hold our signs and we'd speak at the mic, and they would talk about all sorts of, and the corporation for Harvard and the stocks and the bonds and the members and this. And we were like, I was like, at that moment, I said, I'm going to law school.
Whoa. So
I don't like this.
In that moment,
I don't like them talking to me about how I don't understand them.
So okay, whoa. Now you're bridging into kind of your legal work. So in that conflict, right? This kind of like argument about what Harvard's doing with their money and who the students are and how it offends the values of the very people who are in the school. That moment, you're like, I'm going to law school, right? So how did you end up
exactly.
from that moment to the JAG Corps?
Okay. Well, I had a scholarship to Harvard, and I did my ROTC training at MIT, because at that time Harvard did not allow the military on campus back from the 60s. And so I would just walk down to MIT or get on the subway and do my marching and training with my my detachment commander, and learned about that down there. And so I had a scholarship to school, and I owed 1 year for every year that they paid for my college. So I came out, and they took me in as a lawyer. So they were perfectly happy to get a lawyer, because they gave me an educational delay so I could go to law school. And then when I came out, I probably had a little more value than just a brand new bright penny lieutenant.
Wow. And with the...
So that's how I got the JAG
all right,
training.
And so I wanted to step back for a second, because you were dealing with the issue of divesting from South Africa because of its apartheid system in the 60s, right? When did Harvard officially divest, or did they ever officially divest?
They did. They did while I was in school. They did. Let's see, I started in 77. So I think in 79 or 80, they got out. And they made a public statement, and we felt very empowered. So you got to see
firsthand the impact of advocacy, right? So you saw success.
And that was your first campaign, right?
The other thing, that was my absolute first campaign. The other thing that happened to me, which is kind of crazy, but I'll share it, is that having grown up in the Caribbean, I remember I came back to the States, I was 15. So I had learned European history, West Indian history, and I knew about American history, but not in detail. And so I was sitting in my African-American class at Harvard, and I was learning about people and the sit-ins and people being beaten and dogs biting people and people sitting at the back of the bus. And I was like, all I could think of was, that is terrible. And I thought to myself, thank God Mom and Dad never did that. And in that split second, my head blew up, because I just counted the years. Mom and Dad had lived through all of it. They had just never mentioned it to me at all. And growing up in the Caribbean, people don't talk about what's going on in the States, back in the day. So when I went home, I was super mad. I was hot. I was like, you have me out here like a Martian. Everybody around me knows the history, and I'm just thinking everything's great. And at that moment, see, I make these that moment decisions. I said, I'm going to do civil rights.
Oh.
So I knew I needed to be a lawyer. But when I learned that I had just barely escaped under the gate in terms of how its doors were open to me. I could sit in the classroom with men and people of different colors. All of these opportunities, and I played sports. So Title IX had just been passed. So I was like, I got
What sport you
everything
played?
because the life had been opened up. Soccer, man.
Okay.
I'm a striker.
But, hey, and Cecile, check this out. The military, do they have like civil rights lawyers? Or are their lawyers more like prosecutors and like public defenders?
They have basically three areas, and one is the first reason we're there is military discipline. You have to make sure the troops turn up and follow orders and don't get drunk and beat each other up and stuff like that.
So
that's
court-martial
the
folks.
discipline side. And then there's another, right? And take Article 15, take a stripe off, take one of their ranks off their arm, put them in the break. And so that was a heavy hitter side, discipline, right? And then they have a side that defends. So I did the prosecutor first, and then I defended. I had my own little shop, and I defended people to keep them out of jail and keep them not being discharged. And then they had a whole nother section called civil. And because running a base is like running a city. So you're like the mayor's lawyers, the city lawyers. So you try, and then those you defend. If somebody says, I was treated badly because, of my religion, then you would help the commander and defend that. So that was part of the discrimination, but you would defend. You didn't sue on behalf of individuals because other people would sue the government. So you would be in the defense. So those are the two sides.
On the court-martial side, right, I found it interesting. I served in the military for some time, and I found it interesting that everybody was in JAG. And so that meant that, 1 year you could be a prosecutor, and the next year you could be a defense attorney. And that folks were like interchangeable.
That's right.
And I'm wondering, how did that work out? Because I know
That's wild to think about, man.
Because one of the things that, and especially when you talk about the state courts, people always talk about, the good and bad, right? And so they'll look at it from a bad way, saying, yeah, man, my defender or my attorney was too friendly with the state, and worked with the state to get me to take a plea or whatever. And so folks worry about that relationship between prosecutor and public defender. But then on the flip end, where folks take advantage of that. And so because your attorney is good friends with the state attorney,
that's right.
it work out a deal or something for you, much better than if they didn't have a relationship. It was not your typical deal, so people would get a sweet deal because of the relationship. And so how did that work out especially when you was dealing with servicemen that were facing court-martial? And how was you able to draw the line?
That is such a great question. Such a great question. The Air Force did it differently than some of the other branches. The Air Force decided that if someone was going to prosecute, that is all you could do. So when I first got out of law school, they want the lawyers to cut their teeth on the prosecution side. So you would be trained up under some senior lawyers, senior JAGs, and you would get like a bit part in the trial, like you're going to get this witness. And so they would look over your notes and talk to you and prepare, and you would practice in the courtroom, So you would be trying cases under the direction of a top-level person who would groom you how to do it. And then when they felt like you understood what you were doing, then you would be given the job to defend. And I did both. I started as a prosecutor, and I got groomed by the senior prosecutors. And then after 2 or 3 years of that, then I got my own shop. I had to apply. I got my own shop on base, and nobody could tell me nothing on the base. I had to salute the general, the colonel. I would salute by rank. But my boss left my chain of command, left the base and went all the way to Montgomery and then from there to the headquarters, Pentagon. So the people that wrote up my performance evaluation, they were not on the base. So the better I did in terms of limiting damage to my active duty military that I defended, the more pats on the back I got. So that's how the Air Force handled it, because of the issue you just raised. How this day you're going to prosecute, and then 2 weeks later you're going to defend. The Air Force said, no, you're going to just do one section right now for a couple of years till we train you. Then when you know what you're doing, you're going to go get your own shop and go on defense, and your boss will be off the base. So that's what they did in the Air Force. But I know every branch is not the same.
So let me ask you, Cecile, like, to kind of bridge that into the conversation around your activism and our work together in terms of Amendment 4 in 2018. So how did that experience prepare you to engage as a civil rights attorney, right? I mean, here you are working for the military, learning, and developing your worldview. And then it's like, boom, now I am a activist, civil rights attorney, and we see a whole different trajectory begin. Like, what was that like?
Right. When you're on a base and everybody on the base but you has to answer to the commander, you definitely get that sense of independence. I was about the only entity on the base with thousands of people, and my boss was training me and encouraging me to stop the commander from destroying someone's career or putting them, in jail forever. I would defend, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes you'd have to work out a deal, but it really taught me to be on my own and to listen to advice of other lawyers in my field, but not be worried if I didn't get invited to this or that event, because my job was not to get along with people. It was to protect the rights of the active duty. And being a civil rights lawyer is very similar. I get along with most of the lawyers in my town, but I'm not like buddy like with everybody, because, sometimes we have to go against each other. So it did prepare me to just listen to a certain extent, a higher calling. A different calling.
So when I hear that, right, I hear about the higher calling that you're talking about, the values that, you live by. Were you drawn more into kind of this is the right thing to do? Or did you see the power of the law and you saw that this is a place you could have an impact? I'm sure it's both, but I'm curious, how you kind of made decisions.
It's so funny to get these questions, because nobody asks these questions, but you guys have insight. You know what's really going on in lawyers' minds. You've talked to quite a few, and you really know. But what happened to me, the power of the military, the power of the government, I did see it firsthand. There was a young man that was accused of doing something wrong, and I was going to give him an Article 15 as my job as the prosecutor at the time. And the big boss had said, Captain Scoon, have you researched this? Yes, sir. Have you spoken to the witnesses? Yes, sir. And is this right? Yes, sir. So I wrote up my Article 15. I looked at my courts martial manual, got my elements, I wrote it up, put it on the form. I was getting ready to present it. And somebody walked up and recanted their statement. And right then and there, I had to decide, was Captain Scoon going to just try to make herself look good? Because why didn't you find this witness? Or why didn't they retell me earlier? Or were you going to do the right thing? Well, it was just a split second, right? That Article 15 was withdrawn on the spot. And I don't know if that had ever happened to any other JAG. But I just went to my commander and I said, sir, this has happened, and I cannot in good faith. I no longer have the conviction that this person is guilty. This other person that I was relying on has recanted, and I must withdraw this Article 15. And my decision was supported. But in that moment, I truly saw the power of a wrongful conviction, right? What could happen if you don't stop, if you ignore evidence that shows a person is innocent? And I went home shaking like a leaf that night. The power of the government that let me know, oh no, we've got to have defenders, because the defender has to balance out the power of the
Cecile,
government.
I appreciate that you felt the way you felt, right? But, we've seen over the years that there have been a lot of cases where people were convicted that turned out to be innocent, right? And in a lot of those cases, they had what they call Brady violations. And basically, the Brady violations was that the state or the prosecutor had evidence that would have helped the defendant, but they didn't give the defendant that evidence, right? Now, when you talk about the power of a prosecutor to not only charge someone, but to create a situation in which that person might end up losing their liberty, that is a lot of power. How do you hold someone that hold that much power? How do you hold them accountable? And what should be the standard applied to them, right? And let me just give context, right? Because if a person is walking across the street and I'm driving my car, right, and I hit that person, right, that there's a higher standard of care that's assigned to me, right? And it's assigned to me because I'm driving a car, right? I'm operating an instrument that could cause great bodily harm. And so the standard of care that is applied to me will be much higher than the standard of care that's applied to that person that's walking, right? And it could be that that person was in the wrong, but my standard of care causes me to be liable for that person getting hurt. You with me?
Totally.
All right. And so and the key thing being that the standard of care is higher for me because I'm operating an instrument that can cause grave bodily harm. And so when you have a prosecutor, right, that has the power to take away a person's liberty, right, their freedom, right, that's like, or even to take their life, what standard of care should that prosecutor be held to?
Well, I think that we should look at that because there's a lot of immunity because people do make mistakes. And an honest mistake, we all can make. We're human. But in a situation where it can be shown that the prosecutor was aware of the word they use is exculpatory or evidence that would show that the person is more likely to be innocent, and they are aware of it and they hide it and they don't provide it as required by the rules of evidence and how to do trials, I think there should be some consequences for that if it can be shown that it was intentional.
Like what kind of consequences?
I'm not sure if I'm aware of any state. I'm not sure if I'm aware of any state that has something specific that could be shown because if you can show that a person intentionally withheld evidence that would be more likely to prove innocence, that's devastating to the individual who's charged and their entire family and loved ones. It has that ripple effect.
Well, yeah, and more likely than not, they've already been impacted, right? It's usually there's already a trial, there's already been punishment, and then finally you find this exculpatory evidence. I think is what you said, and right.
Yes.
So you've already had consequences.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's something that legislators should talk about. We should have equity and fairness all around, and consider what kind of ramifications or consequences for proving intentional. Now, there's a lot that's in the gray area, and then that would you just have to let alone. It's just people might have not perceived that this was evidence that would show innocence. But anything that was blatantly obvious, I think that there should be something that there would be a consequence for that, but hopefully that would stop these cases from occurring.
Wow. Well, thank you.
These tragedies.
Thank you so much, Cecile. And you know what? Right now, we're going to just go ahead and ease on to a little break. But when we come back, we're going to get down into the meat and potatoes of the work that you're doing now, starting with your efforts around Amendment 4, and we're going to lead into your current fight around redistricting.
Welcome back, everybody.
Perfect.
We look loving this conversation that we're having with Cecile Scoon, who's the president of the League of Women Voters of Florida. And Cecile, you were one of the key players in Amendment 4. You spent years, you developed a relationship with the team, with the leadership, with Desmond. Looking back, right, what were some of the lessons that you learned from that experience, the things that you really take with you to continue to galvanize the work that you're doing?
Well, first of all, it was a great joy to work alongside Desmond and yourself, Neil, and so many of our allies that worked with us. I remember the efforts of the ACLU, just so many groups, Latino Justice. I mean, the room was full. You had so many people that had committed their energy and efforts to righting this terrible wrong. So it was really an honor and one of the highlights of my life. And I told my children that working on trying to get Amendment 4 passed, it felt like, to use the words of Howard Simon, I believe, the ACLU executive director, I believe he said something like, the permanent removal of voting rights with a felony conviction was the last remaining vestige of slavery. That just hit me so hard. I was like, wow, this came from slavery, and it's still hitting majority of people, the disproportionate number of people, the same people it was intended for in the beginning, to stop Black men from voting after slavery was over. And of course, over time, it impacted everybody. And the majority of people impacted were actually white people. And that was something that we held out as the truth. But the fact that it started that horrible way just really, really got me fired up. As Desmond said, like, we got to do something about this. So those were good times. Yep. Those were good times. It was great to work with people who had shared that passion.
Yeah, well, you're definitely you can tell your kids and as a matter of fact, I heard you're a new grandmother.
Ooh, 7-month-old.
Yeah. Right? So you can tell your kids and your grandkids that you're a part of history. You let them know grandma was a part of history.
We all were together.
Yeah, that's what's up. But no, we really did.
We all were together.
We really appreciated your
Desmond,
efforts on that, though.
I want to praise you for your continued connection to your humble start with that, and the way you just talk about your feelings and your pathway, your journey. And then with Neil, you're both so approachable and human. That is such a gift, because certainly you could be real big-headed and just look down on people, and you do everything opposite. And when I see you meeting a person, it could be a young man who's crying because he wants to change his ways, and you just open your arms and just bring him in and just work with him, and that just melts my heart and makes it all so much more human, because it is person by person, yes, and it is redemption by redemption, which you both demonstrate so well. So I want to thank you for that very powerful examples and mentorship that you provide so many other people.
Well, thank you so much, Cecile. I really appreciate your kind words. Mm-hmm. Really do. And definitely want to, once again, just thank you, just for the energy, the passion. You was one of the folks that was willing to roll up your sleeves and get to work in the trenches. And matter of fact, that
That's
just
right.
leads me to this question, because, in the past, when I first heard of the League of Women Voters, my image or impression of the League of Women Voters was that it was a group of white women, middle-aged to seniors who, was championing voting rights issues. I never thought that, it was anything other than that, right? Then, you were one of a handful of people who I met that were not white, right? And now you're actually the first first black president of the Florida League of Women Voters. And I just wanted to talk to you about, the image that I had of the League of Women Voters and how your work is helping to transform that image in people's mind.
Wow, that's also a big question. I can tell you what drew me into being more active in the league. I had been a long-term member, dues-paying member, because some of my lawyer friends said, hey, join the league. They help people register to vote. They do forums. I'm like, oh, forums. And they educate people, and I would volunteer every once in a while. But I wasn't one of those ladies that would attend regularly. I would turn up. But when I started seeing how the league followed up on its statements about what was fair, and they would go to court.
Yep.
And they would litigate hard cases.
They would sue you in a heartbeat.
I was like, I need to pay more. I need to pay attention to these ladies here. And gentlemen, too. We do have men, too. But I wanted to pay attention and put my energy in an organization that was pretty much was soup to nuts. They would be out there registering people to vote. They would try to educate the citizens so they know different ways of how their vote was impacting things, and they would have information, however you want to vote, but you would be informed, right? They do those forums.
Yeah, that was one thing.
And then they would try to...
I was saying the one thing that I always can count on each election cycle is getting a voter's guide by the League of Women Voters.
Oh, that's right.
That's like the most thorough voter's guide I have ever seen, right? Actually anywhere.
Thank you so much.
Well, and I think about, Des, think about 2017, 2018. I mean, the number of league events that we would go to, right? So you go into a community and we'd talk about Amendment 4. We'd talk about the people who are impacted. And yeah, you're right, man. Like structure and real community organization,
and you're getting educated.
Yeah,
you got educated about candidates. You got educated about issues. And so that is something I definitely give the league mad kudos for. As it relates to public education. Man, I don't know a better outfit out there right now.
My emails, it's almost every day, and I know I'm exaggerating, but I get an email saying, come meet Cecile Scoon in this county or that county or this county.
That's only because you gave Cecile your email address, right? And Cecile Scoon is like a Tasmanian devil. She gets a hold of your email.
That's true.
Man, she's going to work you, right?
True.
She's going to draw you in. And at the end of the day, I mean, she is so, her level of tenacity.
That's right.
When it comes to something that she believes in. Nah, you're not shaking her, man.
I got to give the kudos there, right? You just gave kudos. You're right. Everywhere I turn, I'm like, oh, another opportunity to go to an event.
So they're definitely going to have events.
Well, we're all taking notes from each other, but I tell you what, we worked really hand in hand getting Amendment 4 passed. Mm-hmm. And Desmond was one of our main leaders and exciting the citizens and the people, and the league got back involved and took it on hard and ran real hard toward the end of the race. And we all together got it through. And now what afterwards the legislators got involved and they added that financial payment requirement, which has really, really slowed down the returning citizens being able to come and vote. And I know you all have a wonderful program where you pay the fines and fees of many of the members that returning citizens that come to you. But there's a whole nother group that needs help, and they need lawyers to go to court because the fines are too high or they don't understand what their records are. And the league is trying to help with that. And so we need to work together as we try to train the lawyers to try to put together the communities and the individuals that just need help reviewing their records, because, we have a situation, as you know, what's going on in Alachua, I believe. And I heard there was problems in Leon counties where people who thought that they had completed their sentences they registered to vote, and then now there's been some follow up with the state getting involved and charging people. So we want to end that.
Yeah,
so we need to make sure.
There's definitely a lot. There's definitely a lot of just stuff just going around in Florida that is keeping people like occupied. And that's definitely one that electric kind of story really kind of touched us, and we have been really closely monitoring that as well. There's just so many different areas that needed to be addressed in that situation. But we taking it one step at a time to address that. But when you was talking though, Cecile, one of the things that stuck out to me was, okay, you had fair districts, back in the early 2000s, they had Amendment 5, I think it was Amendment 5 and 6 passed that talked about fair districting, right? And the League of Women Voters was one of the main folks that was actually suing the state to honor fair districts, right? What the voters called for in those two Constitution amendments. And then, fast forward a few years, the League of Women Voters is once again at the forefront, right, suing the state, trying to force the state to honor what the Florida voters voted for on Amendment 4, right? And then now you fast forward a couple more years, the League of Women Voters is back in court again, suing the state about this redistricting process. Man, you guys are not playing with these lawsuits, and it seems like you guys are basically saying when it comes to anything that minimizes access to democracy, you guys are like the Marine Corps or something, saying not on my watch, right?
No, that's
and
right.
so, really, what's going on now, Cecile, with this redistricting?
Okay. Right. Well, that our governor decided that he wanted to draw his own maps instead of reviewing the maps that the legislator is given the responsibility of drawing maps. Nobody's ever heard in Florida of a governor drawing their own maps. So that right there was, wow, that's aggressive. And then the maps that he drew were very harmful to the African American votes and seemed to be a direct violation of the Fair District Amendments of our Constitution that you were referring to. And this is very concerning because citizens of all races voted on the fair districts. That was a citizens' initiative, did not come from the legislators. Citizens said, I think it was almost 64% passes, that overwhelmingly we don't want gerrymandering to pick to favor a political party or to favor an individual candidate. We want just draw the maps properly. And another thing they put in there was that because of the history of racial discrimination and blocking Black people from voting, sometimes the government itself, or they would allow the Klan or other groups to terrorize and kill people, like what was done in Ocoee, where a whole village and community of people their homes were burnt down and over 60 people killed because one person wanted to vote, which was lawful at the time, but they wanted to punish that person.
Wait, hold up. Cecile, I want you to continue that story, but there's a special piece of that story there, right? And so that one person that you're talking about was also the individual that were helping people pay off fines and fees so they could vote, right? Because remember, they had people back then who, in order for them to vote, they had to pay a poll tax, right? And a lot of folks in Ocoee could not afford
to pay
the poll tax. And so I think Mr. Perry was helping people pay the poll tax.
Yes, he was.
A lot like how we're helping people pay their fines and fees.
Right.
And so this is,
things just don't change.
There you go. Sometimes just different characters in the play, but the play does not change. So go ahead with this Ocoee story.
Correct. So that incidents like that, and there's many others that we don't know the full history because they weren't reported. But because of the accepted and known history of our state in our fair districts against African Americans voting, it said that if there was an opportunity for a racial minority or a language minority to have a district drawn in a way where they have an opportunity to select a representative of their choice, then that needs to be done. In other words, if there's a community that's large enough that they could select a representative of their own choosing, you needed to do that. That's one thing Fair District said. The second thing Fair District said is once those minority access districts are created, you cannot diminish them. You can't cut them in two or, crack them, draw lines so that you lessen their power. Well, lo and behold, Governor DeSantis's map does just that. It takes the 4 African American districts that were established by our Florida Supreme Court in 2015 in the lawsuit that one of the lawsuits you mentioned. They established that that's what fair districts required. It goes from 4 to 2. That's a direct violation of the Fair Districts Amendment. It's like, that's simple math.
So
the governor is saying...
Go ahead. It's so funny.
Go
You
ahead.
would literally... I was about to say, if the governor was sitting here right now, he would say that his maps are race neutral. How does that kind of coalesce with what you were just talking about?
It's hard to believe that they're race neutral when he's chosen to divide up. There are other places he could have divided and been race neutral. He chose to divide up and weaken the black areas. That doesn't appear to be race neutral. And then I would also say that he's admitted himself that the map that he has drawn is not in compliance with the law stated by the Florida Supreme Court. The Florida Supreme Court is the highest giver of the interpretation of the law in our state. When they say that Florida law means this, we all got to listen, whether I like it or not. And the governor is saying, I don't want to listen. I don't like that law. It's going to be changed. So I'm going to do something that's against the law right this minute because I think it'll be changed sometime in the future.
And because I appointed...
Well, if you and I pick laws that we wanted to obey or...
But Cecile,
right?
let's add this one point. And I appointed, right, how many? 3?
Right at the beginning of his term,
I appointed 3 judges to the Supreme Court. So, yeah, I can do what I want.
There needs to be a place where people do the right thing regardless of whether it's going to help their party, their friend. When you swear the oath to serve the people of Florida, you are taking the oath to serve all of the people of Florida. And the governor's job is to enforce all of the laws of Florida, not pick and choose and say, not only am I not going to enforce it, I'm going to knowingly go against the law that was stated by the Florida Supreme Court because I don't like it.
So why should...
That's what's going on. And the governor has actually admitted that.
So why should voters care about this?
Well, I think every person should care if the leader of your state is following the law or not, regardless of what the law is. If you have someone who's saying, I don't like the law right now, so I'm not going to follow it. I just want to do what I want to do, and I hope I get my way down the road. That doesn't make sense. That's not the higher good. I mean, aside from the fact that it's redistricting, it's voting, it's just we should be a state and a nation where the rule of law wins. That is how people learn to follow the guidelines, because you can't turn around and enforce the law and the other person says, well, I don't believe in that law. I think it will change. That's chaos. So that right there, that touches every citizen. Then when you look at what it's doing to African Americans and to our fair districts, which were voted on by everybody, it's a direct slap in the face of those laws.
Cecile, it's so interesting when I was thinking about when you were saying, and there's a kind of a through line with the returning citizen movement, second chance movement here in Florida, which is this idea of elected officials having the power to choose their own voters. right? Like we saw that with the Amendment 4, where all of a sudden you had a clemency process that got shut down, and it seemed, hey, there's one group of people who get to choose, whether somebody's voice is heard in society or not. And so when we started getting into some of the redistricting conversation through the prison gerrymandering piece, where all of a sudden you see people literally being drawn into different communities or not being heard, and it just felt that same way. Like for us, it was that was that through line, and it seems like there's the bigger redistricting story as well, which is what we're talking about too. Which it does come back to this: I'm going to pick my voters.
And here's the thing, right? And when we look deep into it, like, could we assign it all on one person or one party, right? Because that there's this battle to get seats in the House, and whether we losing a certain number of seats or gaining a certain number of seats, so folks one party or the other could have control over the House. And so, as we're looking at this redistricting, even from a much more broader perspective, right, then we're looking, especially around through that lens of politicians wanting to pick and choose who their voters are, right? We're seeing identical things in other states. In these states, they're blue states. Right? And so that Democrats are going to try to get as many states. I don't think anything... as seats as they can get. Republicans are going to get as many seats as they can get.
I think Florida is an outlier in terms of other states. If you compare,
we outlier in everything.
I don't think there's ever been a governor, right? A governor who's drawn their own maps. I think that's never happened before. So right there, where the governor is insisting, and then he threatened to veto the maps that the legislators and the Senate and the House reps said. All through the normal session, they said, we must abide by these maps because to do anything else, they said this, Desmond. They said this, Neil. Their lawyer said this. If we don't maintain these maps, that's illegal. That would be a violation of what the Florida... They said the law. So then we know what the law is because it's written, and all of these people, through many hearings, if you listen to the tapes, they literally said, we must do it this way. To do anything else will break the law. They said those words. That's not Cecile's words. So here we are now with the broken law. So that is a little extreme. Florida, again, is not like the other states.
So so that, I think that is up for debate a little bit. But no, definitely know that Florida is definitely outliers in a whole lot of stuff, right? But something that you said that kind of like triggered me with what you said, that the folks said that they know it's the law, but yet they decide to go a different way, right? And it kind of reminded me of
that was said.
Yeah, so it kind of reminds me of a similar situation in which you have individuals in Gainesville that thought that they were eligible to register to vote because of a supervisor of election came into their place to register them to vote, right? And then you have a prosecutor like, we're going to charge them willful ignorance of the law is not a defense, right? And so they're getting,
they're saying they have intent to defraud. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so these folks are, once again, we talk about standards because we talked about the different level of culpability or the standards that should be applied when you have so much power. That's right. Like driving a motor vehicle. And so I'm looking at...
Or running a democracy.
Yeah. So I'm running a democracy. And so now you have individuals that has a lot of power, right? And they're doing something that could impact people's lives. And they know that this is against the law. And they willfully do it. What standards should they be held to? Because a person that was in jail and... supervisor of election come and register them to vote. They have the impression that they can vote, right? And they're being prosecuted and face jail time, right, for that, right, where they was not, oh, yeah, I know I can't vote, but I'm going to vote anyhow, right? That's basically what Cecilia is saying, that these legislators are doing. I know I'm not eligible to vote, but I'm going to vote anyhow because maybe sometime in the future, right, I'm going to be able to vote.
It's going to be a different court that's going to make a different decision, so at that point I'll be fine.
So I think that, you know, officials...
I cannot deny the analogy that you have laid out. It sounds very similar.
So I think that elected officials or people in power or people who have control over an instrument that can cause great harm be held to a much higher level. It appears that the people in Alachua... That's what I think.
The law, we were told, it has an intent requirement. You have to knowingly... register to vote, knowing that you have not completed your sentence.
Okay.
And if people have been told that they completed their sentence, and the people telling them are governmental entities that should know, it's hard to believe that they're being prosecuted.
And even I don't even think they have to go as far as saying, "Oh, you completed your sentence." If a person, if a person saying, "I'm from the driver's license bureau and I'm here to issue you a driver's license," right? You kind of give that person the impression that, you know, they're authorized to get a driver's license.
Right. So you shouldn't be thinking
just the office,
months down the road, I can't drive. They told me I got a driver's license.
And the power and the authority of and the legitimacy of the office, right, kind of conveys or relays some type of underlying message that, okay, yeah, I'm good to go because these people are coming to register me, so I'm good to go. But I think the bigger issue is about, you know, the level, the standard that you hold people to. And I think that, you know, one of the things as returning citizens, we're always hearing this righteous indignation around crime and punishment and around, you know, you have to, if you do the crime, you have to do the time and all of those things. I think that also should be applied across the board. That if there's a certain standard, right, to be a voter, right, and there's a certain quality of life that you have to live in order to be the voter, it should be applied all the way across the board.
That's right.
And when you have people in great power that's knowingly going against what they know is the law, but just because they don't like it, right, they go against it, right, and think it's okay, then why is it not okay?
There appears to be two different standards is what you're talking about.
So, man, listen, I think that this was a great conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Cecile, listen, we are out of time, but let me tell you, it's been great having you on the show. We definitely need to have you back, man, because there's a whole nother page of questions that we didn't even get an opportunity to ask you yet, right? And so we definitely gonna have to bring you back for round 2. We should have known better. You can't contain all of Cecile Scoon in just one or even 2 episodes. We might need 3 or 4, but we'll definitely bring you back. Thank you so much for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you real soon.
Yeah, we sure appreciate you, Cecile. We appreciate your leadership, the history that we've all walked together, and we just want to say thank you very much for joining us on the Our Voice podcast.
All right, here we go. You ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let my people vote.